Today on the news and why it matters, mob mentality, mask style. President Trump deems houses of worship essential, but that doesn't stop Chicago police from banging on the church's doors. And are criminal referrals coming from the Mueller investigation? We've got a lot coming up, and it starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I'm Sarah Gonzalez. Happy Tuesday. Did I say Monday earlier?
I honestly don't even remember.
Okay. I just worried. I was like, oh, I almost said it's Monday. It's Tuesday. Oh, crap. Did I say it was Monday? It's Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Hope you all had a lovely Memorial Day weekend. I'm joined today by Chad Prather, host of the Chad Prather Show.
You're cute. Nobody pays attention to what you say.
Oh.
Look at you.
Oh.
I ain't kid.
Wait.
That's gonna
you kid about what?
Totally going to backfire.
You kid about what? Also, BlazeTV contributor Josh Hammer here at the round table. Thank you guys for being here.
The pleasure's always mine, Sarah.
Always.
Appreciate it. All right, so top of the show, let's talk about, I could not believe this. I cannot believe this is America in 2020. We've got, over the weekend, a viral video shot at a supermarket in Staten Island. Of course it's New York. Sorry to all of you Yankees out there, but of course this comes from New York. A mob of angry shoppers in masks for coronavirus, and they are berating and chasing out a shopper who is not actually wearing a mask. Here's a little bit of that scene.
Loser, bro. Get out. Yeah, go moving to act like a dirty. What do you think?
Wow. There's a lot to say about that. Number one, now we've gotten to the point where the fear is so bad that we are screaming at people who choose not to wear a mask. I feel like we're forgetting the fact that there are always extenuating circumstances that we don't know about people. We don't know if she has a medical condition that she, prevents her from wearing a mask. We don't know if she has, it's not just physical medical conditions, right? You could have claustrophobia. You can't wear a mask if you have claustrophobia. I'm pregnant. I can't breathe with that freaking thing on. Like I cannot, I wear it in the hospitals for as long as I have to in the hallway, and I have to take it off because I can't breathe with it on. Wow. And I feel like my baby probably needs oxygen more than they need me to wear the mask because there's nothing really to indicate, that I'm at higher risk or what have you. But now we've gotten to the point in society where you're being kicked out and berated, pushed out of stores where you choose to shop because you choose not to wear a mask. Chad?
One, I'm just happy to know that you are televisionally, openly pregnant at this point. I don't know when you made that announcement.
Oh, I did. A while, yeah, a while back.
Because I've been like, mum's the word here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, anyway.
What a gentleman.
Yeah, well.
I know, right?
I
Who
try.
knew?
Well, I got 5 kids. Trust me, I know the wrath of a woman with child. I don't think this is fear. This is man's inhumanity to man. This is a free rein to be engaged in bully mentality and be mean to your fellow man in a gang capacity where it gives you some sort of power, and you start to see the tyranny trickle down even to the citizens. And this is the kind of thing that caused Nazi Germany. This is the kind of thing. We think that just happened in a bubble somewhere in history and people haven't ever been mean to each other. But human history, recorded human history, is thousands of years of this type of activity that trickles down and delineates into the next step, which becomes where they are actually forcing physically people out of these buildings. This is where they screamed her out. Yeah. These people weren't afraid. One guy takes his mask off to yell at the woman.
Oh, good.
So if you pay attention to it, one guy actually pulls his mask down to scream. This is going to have to happen to a defenseless woman in Staten Island, New York, because this is not going to flow in Fort Worth, Texas, where I live, if it happens to me. Because I will show you where you can stick that mask with your face still attached to it. It's just not going to go down. So then send me to jail, because that is another one of those hills I'll die on. Mm-hmm. You're not going to treat me like that. This is America, folks. It's America. And I'm sorry you're a wuss, but we're going to go on living with our freedoms and our liberty.
Josh.
You know, Sarah, I remember the January 2016 Republican primary debate. I think it was in South Carolina, when Ted Cruz was talking about Donald Trump's, quote, New York values. And at the time, people were like, what does this comment even mean? I remember taking to Red State to blog for our friend Eric Erickson at the time. And I wrote a piece entitled In Defense of Ted Cruz's Quip About New York Values. And I wrote that piece as someone who grew up in the New York area, whose parents, whose brothers still live in the New York area. And that clip right there is the personification of the New York values that Cruz at that time was railing against. And Cruz was railing against it in what we saw in the video for a very simple reason, which is that New Yorkers, by and large, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush here, no one's going to accuse me of ignoring the very kind New Yorkers. By and large, they're jerks, okay? There's a reason why New York State is hemorrhaging citizens year in and year out. New York and Illinois, they're all leaving. They're all going to Florida. They're all going to Texas. And not just for warm weather and for no state income tax. They're coming here because the people are kinder, because we actually treat people, you know. I'm not a native Texan, but one of the things I love so much about this state is I walk down the street, everyone's just so friendly. What a huge distinction to what we just saw. But yeah, so New York is a unique specimen. Staten Island, by the way, Staten Island is probably the most quintessential New York of all the 5 boroughs. Brooklyn gets the most notoriety for a lot of reasons. Staten Island is the most stereotypical of all New York State stereotypes. I mean, I could tell stories. I'm not going to do it on the air, but there's a lot to unpack there.
But isn't Staten Island, by and large, kind of conservative in its ways?
So it's
politically?
It's funny. They vote for Republicans. They do. I think they vote for McCain in 08, Romney and Trump. They really do. So it's politically right of center. It's like a real kind of it's real like blue collar New York mentality. Yeah. But the people like. Have you ever met someone from Staten Island, Chad? Like the accents there are just like out of this world. It's just like cartoonish. And I say that, you know, I've distant relatives from Staten Island. I still say that. But in any event, the broader point here, the most important point, I'm going to stop just railing against New York City. The most important point here is what Chad was going for, obviously. And, you know, this kind of brings to mind a Twitter rant that quickly became infamous about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago from Rusty Reno, who's the editor of First Things magazine, which is a religious social conservative journal. I published there, big fan of the publication. Rusty did a Twitter thread that quickly led him to actually delete his Twitter because the pushback was so bad. And it was not a particularly good thread. I'm not going to defend the thread. He was basically talking about how everyone who wears a mask is a coward and is like submitting to fear and cowardice. He's basically saying people back in 1918 during the Spanish flu did not wear a mask, which is not quite historically accurate. In any event, I'm not going to defend the thread, but I get what he was saying. What he was talking about was this virtue signaling mentality of kowtowing to political correctness, and I actually really understood that and viscerally grasped it. And that's also what we saw in that video there. This is not America. Like, this is not America. This is not the America that that we live in, that we belong in. That sort of social pressure to conform is here, there, and everywhere toxic.
Yeah, and the virtue signaling, yes, absolutely. But I think on top of that, too, it's this really scary shift from individualism to collectivism, right? Where everything is done for the greater good. It's my responsibility to make sure that I wear a mask for everyone else. And I don't have a say in the matter. I can't look at my individual, right or just my individual preference, right? It has to be good for the collective. And I get really worried that we are going down this slippery slope of collectivism at the same time that we've got all of these people running to run our country who believe in that. But a step further and a step further and a step further when, you look at all of these democratic socialists, you look at these communists like Bernie Sanders, we've got a real problem with that in this country at the same time that the government and the mainstream media are pushing the narrative that we need to operate under this collectivist mentality, that we need to do everything for the greater good and we have no individual choices. Yeah,
well, I tweeted that video out. And in my normal facetious inappropriate way, I said, do you realize how much spit I can generate while I tell you to blank off? if this were, and of course people started on me about, you realize that threatening to spit on people is a terroristic threat. And I said, this is like, it's an abrasive humor, right? But that speaks to your point. We've bought into the narrative because we've been taught what to think and what to say. And these buzzwords and these catchphrases, it's like people who vote left, they tend to think of themselves as elite. They may be, they may not be. But they look at you as some redneck that, fake tans and has fake teeth, and you know.
Don't give away all my secrets now, okay?
I mean, that ain't
By the
your
way, the
real
teeth are
hair.
real.
You're a man.
The teeth are real, okay?
It's funny how people they buy into the narrative. It becomes the script. It becomes what they work off of, and the frustrating thing for me is how quickly people become, and I hate to use the cliche, they become sheep. Mm-hmm. And we all do it to some degree. You know, I railed on it on an episode of my show here recently, talking about it's okay to not only have an opinion, but to have other people with a different opinion and to be able to look at each other and say, okay, well, that's okay. You know, look, you go on Twitter, you see these videos, and you didn't know that person 5 minutes ago, but now you're out to completely ruin their life because they don't fit your opinion and your narrative. And that's disgusting.
Yeah. Josh, your thoughts on the individual versus collective mentality?
So look, you know, two things can exist simultaneously, okay? You know, I have been publicly generally supportive of this new kind of common good conservatism movement. I really do believe in prioritizing solidarity and order and hierarchy and some of the things that Emmett Burke talked about. That it really goes back all the way to Aristotle, honestly, and the Greeks. I really do believe that. At the same time, though, okay, this is America. And like we have to very carefully balance these two concerns. We are one people, and this has all sorts of ramifications for an immigration policy that should prioritize assimilation. It has all sorts of policy implications for a lot of other areas. But we are ultimately a society of unique individual human beings, and this kind of ties back to, I think it was on Friday when we were with Steve and Eric talking about Joe Biden's horrific comments and the fact that they fit the textbook definition of racism because he was refusing to acknowledge people as individual human beings. And we need to always just bear that in mind here. And that's kind of why, you know, I hedged in the last segment. Don't paint me in a broad brush. I'm not saying every New Yorker is a terrible person, but yeah, they're by and large jerks. But look, I mean, but even people like me who are espousing this sort of common good, you know, we're in this together rhetoric, we need to be very careful here to not go down the leftist rabbit hole of collectivism outright, because we're avoiding that at all costs.
So then let me ask you this, just, you know, based on your belief of the common good that you think we can achieve while still maintaining America as it is, do you see that being any sort of form of like government mandates?
Yeah, so I mean, like within our constitutional structure, most of that comes at the state and local level, obviously,
okay.
right?
Okay. Because I mean, I'd like to believe that with America, we all kind of feel a certain sense of responsibility to an extent, right? Like to a certain extent, not to a crazy extent, where we're going to just negate our own feelings and only operate under, you know, whatever everyone else thinks. But I feel like we're Americans. We look out for each other, you know, for the most part.
Right.
And I just wish that there would be enough of that we wouldn't have to, you know, aim for some sort of government interference.
So I think that's right. Okay. I mean, this is kind of a quintessential conservative debate is, you know, Andrew Breitbart famously said that politics is downstream of culture. I think that's probably right, but I also think that culture can be downstream of politics. I mean, a lot of people kind of like argue this as one way or the other. To me, it's a two-way arrow. I think they actually do work both ways. I mean, in an ideal world, I think you're right. Ideally, if we're the actual virtuous citizens that Tocqueville wrote about in his famous book, Democracy in America in the 1830s, if that is America, if that were America today, then I don't think we would necessarily need to kind of have the heavy hand of government to guide us towards a better direction. Nowadays, I'm kind of open to that two-way arrow, though, personally.
Yeah. All right, we've got more coming up, including President Trump's announcement deeming houses of worship essential. I'm not sure if Chicago got that memo, but we'll get into it. First, we want to thank our sponsor, iTarget Pro. If you are still in one of the many places where social distancing applies, you're not totally locked down in your house, but you're still pretty much locked down in your house. Good luck going to the gun range. Millions of Americans right now are without a place to safely practice with their firearm. But you're in luck. There is iTarget Pro out there for you. Now, iTarget Pro, they use an app that you just download to your phone, and they send you a laser bullet. I know, it's as cool as it sounds. And they will actually allow you to safely practice with your actual firearm in the convenience, privacy, and safety of your own home. Now, obviously, this is working on dry firing, which is going to develop muscle memory. It's going to help you with target reaction, trigger function, and more. And they come in all major calibers, so you can stay sharp with almost any firearm. Whatever you got, they probably have it in your caliber. Right now, you can get 10% off plus free shipping if you use offer code NEWS. don't let circumstances dictate whether or not you're going to train, especially with so many of you out there. I know you're worried of what the government is going to do, and you just went out and you bought a new gun and you haven't been able to practice safely with it. You don't want to do that. Get iTarget Pro, if I can speak today, and you can practice safely at home. Learn your gun. All right, that is iTarget Pro as the letter I. iTargetPro.com. Offer code NEWS. Get 10% off and free shipping. iTargetPro.com. Offer code NEWS. President Trump on Friday made an announcement. You know, we had all these, California, I think New York. There are a lot of churches right now that are kind of in trouble because a lot of states are coming out and they are saying you're shut down. What was it? Minnesota was the craziest one that, you know, you got 50 people who are allowed to be in a restaurant at one time, but you still have the rule that only 10 people can gather at one place for worship. President Trump came out and he said houses of worship should be considered essential and remain open. Here's a little bit of what he had to say on Friday.
Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. Some governors have deemed liquor stores and abortion clinics as essential, but have left out churches and other houses of worship. It's not right. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. The governors need to do the right thing and allow these very important essential places of faith to open right now for this weekend. If they don't do it, I will override the governors. In America, we need more prayer, not less.
Chad, I want to get your thoughts on this. Well, first of all, how do you do that so well? You got the Trump.
It's from going, Jana.
You got the Trump bite down, Pat. Don't show me doing that because I don't want to be seen on camera doing that. I want to get your thoughts, but Josh, you're obviously the legal scholar here. Is that allowed? Is him overriding the states? Is that allowed in this case?
So, before we get into that, I have to say, I laugh whenever Trump says a word that has OR in the end. So they're like, he says worship. I remember back to the 2016 convention, I remember him standing at the podium and saying law and order. And the order, like in my mind is like Palpatine, just like it like extends for like minutes. I'm sure like that didn't happen. But on a more serious note, I got a text, he said this on Friday, if I recall.
Yes.
I got a text from a devout Christian law school friend on Friday, who was like, she basically texted me, she all but said, like, I'm in tears. Like, I've never been this profoundly grateful on like an individual level for a politician standing up for people of faith. Mm-hmm. And that's the amazing thing about President Trump. He's obviously not a particularly religious man himself. We remember
What was your first clue?
Yeah, I mean, we can think back to the campaign when he was like botching the name of he said 2 Corinthians, if I recall, right? But you know what? Whether it's cynical or whether it's genuine, whatever, he actually really does stand up for religious people. His Department of Justice have done that since day one under all the attorney generals he's had, and he gets kudos here. Now, as far as like the actual law here. So a few things are true at the same time, obviously, okay? We do live in a system of federalism. The states are sovereign within their own spheres of influence. And under most Supreme Court precedent, you are allowed discretion in time pandemic to not necessarily allow every constitutional right to the maximal degree. It ends up being a judicial balancing test. However, the Constitution does not go by the wayside, okay? There was a Ninth Circuit case that came out like over the weekend or late last week about a similar situation. It was a church in California that was basically suing to be free of Governor Newsom's, tyrannical decrees there. And Judge Collins, who's a Trump nominee on the Ninth Circuit, wrote a very, very lengthy dissent on this panel explaining how the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, doesn't become like a dead letter because we're in time pandemic. It is a balancing test. It's not like you can enforce every right to the maximum, but it still exists. And to that extent, what Trump can do is threaten to have his DOJ basically sue or to withhold aid or do any sort of other kind of creative legal maneuvers to kind of compel these states to abide by the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. Does he have the authority to just say like he can like single-handedly with like the stroke of a pen like compel them to do so? No, that's not how it works. But by offering this rhetorical guidance, What he's trying to do is get them to comply ideally on their own. And I think I saw some headlines saying that it was like Wisconsin maybe or some other state kind of basically like an hour after he said this was basically saying like, okay, go back to church.
Right.
So that's the goal. That's why he's saying it.
Yeah. Chad?
First of all, let me say, I almost tweeted on Friday because he set the criteria, Josh did, about us being dear friends, and I wanted to ask if we were dear friends, and I said, I'm going to let it go another week. But let me just go on record as saying Josh Hammer is a national treasure. He is, and I am the mutt to his Jeff, okay? So here's my take on that thing. These governors, they have the right to govern their states. As soon as they stop being constitutional, then the president's going to enact exactly what he's saying in this situation. Now, this is the reason why people of faith, and I'm very close friends with numerous men and even women who are on the president's faith council. That was a much bigger deal, 2 years ago than it is now. We're not hearing much about that anymore. But so many of those folks have said to me on an individual basis, they said, President Trump, if he's a Christian, he's like a baby Christian, right? He's just kind of learning. They've talked about things he watches on TV, things he watches on TV. I was going to say things he read, but nobody's ever told me that. They've just said things he's watching on TV that are faith-based. I don't need Donald Trump to be some super religious scholar or devout, faithful man. I need him to protect my faith. And that's in essence what he's done. If I am a Chicago parishioner and they're knocking on the doors of my church, not only am I as the pastor going to sue the government of Chicago, but every parishioner in there needs to sue the governor of Chicago. This is a First Amendment right. Are there conditions to it? Yes, absolutely. But we're in a situation now where we are opening this country back up. We're seeing that happen. And the last thing Chicago government and police need to be worrying about is who's praying inside of a church building. That's my personal opinion. Because, again, it's Chicago.
Yeah. So to Chad's point, in Chicago, the
National
police...
treasure.
Yes, national treasure.
What would I do without you, Chad?
Pastor Courtney Lewis of Cornerstone Baptist Church in Chicago. They were in the middle of their church services, he says, when someone began to bang loudly on the front doors. Turns out it was the cops. They had 3 police cars, 2 unmarked cars, and a representative from, of course, Mayor Lori Lightfoot's office, who is not a national treasure. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. The pastor describes it like the Soviet-style KGB. They said, thankfully, our doors were locked as a normal safety precaution, so the police were denied entry. But an usher said that they saw the mayor's representative try to force their way into the building, and when they didn't get in, they started taking pictures outside. And then someone in the unmarked police car allegedly started filming and taking pictures of the attendees as they were arriving for services. Josh, I guess they just want to intimidate everyone into compliance.
To kind of just return to the overarching theme of our previous segment before the break, is this America or is this no longer America?
Right.
One of the numerous hats that I wear is I'm of counsel at First Liberty Institute, which is a small nonprofit religious liberty-based law firm based here in the Dallas area. And it's called First Liberty Institute for a very simple reason. Because your right to religious liberty is the very first liberty in the First Amendment to the Constitution. It is literally not an exaggeration to say that the reason that America was founded was for freedom of religion. That is why, it might be kind of like trite to say it, but that's why the Pilgrims sailed here on the freaking Mayflower, okay? Like, it's not like...
It's not in the fine print.
No.
It's right there.
It's pretty explicit. George Washington in October, or no, I guess it was October or November, I can't remember, but it was 1789, like less than 2 months after he was inaugurated as president, who kind of issued that first national proclamation of Thanksgiving, which was not about like turkey at the time. It was about beseeching and thanking God for granting all of our blessings in our country. That is who we are. What's going on there in what we just described in Chicago is un-American. It is fundamentally un-American, and there just has to be a better way for law enforcement, for authorities, even for these anti-religion bigots. And I don't know Mayor Lightfoot. I don't know what her policies are, but if she's like Bill de Blasio, then perhaps she has some animus for religion. We've got to hold these people accountable. We've got to do it.
Hey, I know you got to go to a break, but nobody loves a police state more than certain police, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be constitutional protection. There needs to be federal protection for police officers who will not enforce these laws or these commands.
Yes.
not laws, but there needs to be protection for them, because right now we're seeing them, they're losing their jobs and various other things that have gotten popular and viral and all that stuff on the internet, because men and women of law enforcement have stood up to these orders and they've said, we won't do it, and they've lost their jobs, they've lost their livelihoods. There needs to be protection for those.
It's like that. Did we ever see if there was any ramification? What was it? The police officer in New Jersey who went over to the people and said, I just wanted to let you know you're in violation of executive orders. With that being said, have a great day. Yeah. I always worried that something bad was going to happen to him.
But him aside, there's been numerous cases where they have.
Yeah. All right, we have got much more to get into, but first we want to thank our sponsor for the segment, Freedom Project Academy. So I don't know if you guys have seen the new CDC guidelines. Guidelines, I got it. They're not forcing all of the schools and all of the states to follow these ridiculous guidelines for school, and everyone walks the same way and you're not allowed to go to the lunchroom, but they're guidelines. And a lot of times, a lot of states follow the CDC guidelines. So now is a really great time to look into, an alternative way to school your children, because the public schools have really failed them in many other ways, aside from the fact that coronavirus has just made everything crazy. Maybe it's time to take back your child's education, and Freedom Project Academy is here to help you. Your children can receive an accredited classical online education built on Judeo-Christian values in the comfort, privacy, and safety of their own home. This is for students K through 12, so we've got you covered. It's totally interactive educational experience. They attend live classes with other students across the country, and Freedom Project Academy is interested in teaching your students how to think, not what to think. You can go to freedomforschool.com. That is freedomforschool.com. Request your free information packet today. Enrollment is really filling up. It was already filling up before coronavirus hit. So you can imagine how many parents are like, yeah, we're not doing this whole public school thing anymore. We're going to Freedom Project Academy. You're going to want to go there and check it out. That is freedomforschool.com. All right, Devin Nunes says that there are criminal referrals coming for people who were on the Mueller investigation. Of course, he was a ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, and he said in the coming weeks that there will be criminal referrals made against members of special counsel, many of which hid exculpatory evidence on FISA warrant applications that allowed the investigation to continue. He says we've expanded our investigation into the Mueller team and everything that happened with Mueller, and the people at the DOJ and FBI that were above Mueller will be making the criminal referrals. And we're just now putting that together. And of course, as always, waiting on more documents that we really need to come out. And to his credit, we've seen this kind of docu-dump, and Grinnell, I think what it was today, his last day?
Mm-hmm. Yesterday. I guess today.
Yeah, and so he's like, oh, by the way, before I leave, here's some more Russia documents that we're just going to dump out here. But it feels a lot like there are a lot of people who know a lot more than they're letting on, than they're allowed to let on right now in Congress, and they're just kind of waiting to see where the chips fall. But Chad, do you think ultimately anything is really going to happen with all of this, with the Mueller investigation? Are people actually going to pay for all of the abuses of the system that happened?
So the Mueller investigation was bunk, right? People are still out there using that as an argument to try to bring Donald Trump.
Do you not hear that at least several times a week?
I'm so tired of it. It's like, that's already been, he proved that nothing happened. Nothing was there. I don't care what Devin Nunes says. I don't care about referrals for legal action. I want indictments. I want arrests. I want, if it's there, and I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, left, right, I don't care who you are. I don't care. If it's illegal, I want there to be ramifications for it. And I speak for every red-blooded American patriot that's out there who wants justice served. I am sick of being dictated to by people who are worth this amount of money, go to Washington, D.C. for a couple of years and come out and they're worth 10 times that money. It's disgusting. And then you're going to sit there and dictate to our lives and dictate to the people that we duly elect and say, nope, it's a farce, all this stuff. And you're going to spend $30 million on an investigation that came up with literally jack-ish. And I'm tired of it. So I don't want referrals. I don't want speech, because I could sit here and I could say, you know what, in a couple of weeks, Barack Obama, watch and see in a couple of weeks. Nobody's going to remember what I said.
Right.
Not a single soul. And nobody's going to remember what Devin Nunes says either. It's just a referral.
Do you think he's full of crap, though? Or do you
I think he wants it to be
Yeah.
true, but it's not. It's just not.
Wow. Pessimist over here. Cynical Chad over here.
I
Chad
wanna be
Prather.
wrong.
I want you to be wrong, too. Josh, what do you think?
So
Tell me Chad's wrong.
I wish I could, but I share Brother Prather's cynicism and skepticism of this. Look, this is a great political, rhetorical talking point. Again, I hope it's true, but I'm skeptical. And I think the ultimate accountability will come in the ballot box. That is how these things traditionally have been held accountable. And the voters will come, and if the voters want to say that they do not approve of Russiagate and Mueller and Comey and all that crap from 2-3 years ago, and as they should, they will pull the ballot for Donald Trump, and that's how it's accounted for. But there should be accountability because this Michael Flynn stuff all of it is just so crazy. This is literally, Sarah, I think I tweeted this last Friday. This is probably the single craziest political scandal involving high up elected officials in American history.
It's insane.
It really actually is. And I don't say that lightly, okay? There have been a lot of scandals. I mean, people learn about the Teapot Dome scandal from the President Harding administration out in Wyoming. Obviously we know what Bill Clinton was diddling interns or whatever. But this, we're talking about an outgoing presidential administration taking law enforcement, the intelligence community, and sicking it onto an incoming presidential administration in the most grotesquely weaponized, politicized fashion, and then selectively being duplicitous about it, saying one thing in public, another thing behind closed doors, and then selectively leaking material to the press. We all remember the Comey New York Times thing in May 2017, just to kind of get this investigation started, all for the ultimate goal of distracting the President of the United States and trying to politically ruin him and try to stop him from getting stuff done that he wants to get done, substantively speaking. This is a monumental scandal, okay? And it really there should be accountability. So I don't share Chad's skepticism lightly, but I am skeptical.
Well, I mean, and on top of that, you've got someone who is trying to become president of the United States who was, as far as we know, as far as the reports have come out that we know, was involved in this to a pretty high degree, Joe Biden. He was involved in these meetings. He knew what was going on. And still you have the mainstream media who does not want to report accurately on it.
Hey, look, man. Look, man.
Is that all you had?
Look, man. Well, that's all Joe has when he says it. Look, man. And then you can see the hamster on the wheel going, Jesus, Joe. Jesus, Joe, I'm running out of gas here. To Josh's point, he's right. Hillary Clinton's presidency was bought, paid for, it was assured. This whole Russian collusion thing was the nuclear button, right? Once she didn't make it, Barack Obama had to push the button. I don't know what's buried in that swamp that Donald Trump knows about, but when he started threatening draining it, they wanted to protect at all costs that whatever's down there stays in that chest in the muck, right? They don't want that revealed. So I hope that in my lifetime, if I outlive this pandemic and these crazy people in Staten, New York in the grocery store, that one day I know whatever the hell it is that Donald Trump supposedly knows that has made everybody from Washington, D.C. to Hollywood, California completely lose their minds.
All right. We have got, speaking of Joe Biden, we've got a Joe Biden update coming.
Look, man.
I thought it was look fat. Look fat. We want to thank our sponsor, Rough Greens, all right? If you are a dog owner, you want your dog to stay healthy, you're feeding it a food. Probably, if you're like me, which maybe you're not as crazy as I am. I don't know, there aren't many people as crazy as me, but you look at the back of the dog food label and you make sure that you know what ingredients are in your dog food because you want to make sure that you're feeding your dog healthy, nutritious food. Is that just me? Okay. I don't think it is, okay? But what you don't know is that the manufacturers are sterilizing the food, so they're killing everything that you think is good in there, the enzymes, the healthy bacteria for their guts, what helps their mobility for their joints. They're killing all of that, and you're not giving it to your dog. Well, that is where Rough Greens by Vitasmart comes in. Now, Rough Greens is not a dog food. It's not going to replace that food that you buy. You sprinkle it on top of your dog's food, and it brings back massive amounts of vitamins, minerals, digestive enzymes, probiotics, omega oils, antioxidants. It's going to, like I said, it supports a healthy skin and coat. It's going to give your dog improved digestion. And if you've got an older dog, it's going to give them youthful energy and improve their joint health. And your dog is going to love it. I've got a young puppy, so I don't have to worry about the older dog issues, but she never eats. And then I put Rough Greens on it, and she actually eats, and I know that she's eating healthy. She's getting all the nutrients she needs to live a long life. You can take the Rough Greens 14-day Jumpstart Challenge for $14.95. You will see the difference in your dog in 14 days or less. All right, if you want to see your dog thrive again, you can go to roughgreens.com/blaze. That is RUFF greens.com/blaze. All right, an update in the Joe Biden Tara Reade saga. Rose McGowan, she has been just scorched earth on anyone who crosses her lately on Twitter. She posted what the New York Times apparently sent to Tara Reade to try to interview her. Some questions, I guess, to try to get some scoop on her accusations against Joe Biden. And the questions, the list of questions include, to Tara Reade, again, you and your brother both described your mother as an activist. Can you tell us what sort of issues she advocated for? There are some questions about her landlords. Various landlords said you left them owing money and property in disarray. Can you respond to that? And then one more. We heard that after your car was repossessed, friends sold you their vehicle and let you pay it with a no-interest loan, but that you struggled to make those payments and they took it back. Is that true? Now, they did ask some questions on, individuals she followed on the website called Quora. And there were some Russian individuals and, why are you following these Russian individuals on Quora? But it seems a lot like they're trying to discredit the woman, mudsling her finances at a time where, she was trying to put herself through school and what have you. Really kind of feels like they might be trying to push for a different narrative rather than find the truth. But that's just me, Chad, right? I'm just reading too much into that.
I cringe at the details of my own life, right? Yeah. And then you read this like it's some kind of evil diatribe, this narrative of this woman's life, which, let's say, if all this is true, she's been involved in a lot of interesting things. But can you imagine them asking these questions to Christine Ford? No. There is no way. They would have absolutely crucified anybody. Because let's face it, these are pretty good journalistic questions, okay? If you really want to get to the bottom of the truth, investigatively, these are good journalistic questions. But this is not the time. This is not the place. It's not the rules you established. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. They would never do that to Christine Ford during the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. They would have never done that because, again, you believe all women. Now look at this. You went from #MeToo, #BelieveAllWomen. You went from 5 words total and 2 hashtags to all of this. Yeah. There's a problem with that.
So it turns out that the New York Times can actually go do fact searching. Who knew?
Who knew, right? Yeah, all the news that's fit to print, except with a glaring exception, by the way. Mark Levin points this out all the time to his credit. Mr. Producer. Oh, God, I love Mark. But, back during World War II, back during World War II, the New York Times had this incredibly horrible tendency. One might say it was an accident. One might actually say it was on purpose. They buried Holocaust coverage back on page 11, 12, 13 every day. Very, very rarely did the Holocaust receive anything remotely approximating front page or close to front page coverage of the New York Times. And, people speculated why this is. Liberal newspaper, FDR, the president, not known to like the Jews a whole lot. And I don't know. You can make your own conclusions. But look, I guess the New York Times, like Chad was saying, these are good journalistic questions. My issue with this Tara Reade Biden stuff all along has not been about Biden or Reade per se. I don't have an opinion, honestly. I really don't. I genuinely have not studied it close enough to have a strong opinion as to whether these allegations are credible or not. What I care about is hypocrisy and intellectual consistency. Mm-hmm. That's all I've cared about all along. And that's what the people who are now saying listen to all women when their goalpost shifting from believe all women. That's about Dean Piquet or whatever his name is, the executive editor of the New York Times, did that ridiculous jumping through hoops explanation as to how they treated the Ford and Reade allegations separately, convincing approximately 0 people who read the freaking article. Mm-hmm. That is what I personally care about. I care about sticking to the same thing when goes for your side and goes against your side. And, you know, honestly, if we can extrapolate a little bit, just get on my soapbox, I would say that is actually one of the principles by which we ought to judge human beings' moral worths, is whether you are consistent over time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, not just the mainstream media when you're looking at that, but also, you know, you've got Democrat lawmakers. I think Ilhan Omar was the latest one who came out and said, well, I believe Tara Reade.
Well, of course, Ilhan Omar is going to say that.
I'm still going to vote for Joe Biden.
She comes from a culture where they start sexually abusing children at a obviously at a very young age. That's a cultural thing.
But she's not the only one, though, right? Like there are plenty of people who have actually said. They don't
Well,
just
even Gloria
discount
Allred's daughter,
the
whatever her
allegation.
name is,
Yes.
said the exact same thing.
Lisa Bloom.
Yeah, Lisa Bloom. It's ignorance.
Yeah.
Ignorance.
I mean, I just can't imagine screaming about Donald Trump, right? And how he came out on tape saying that he got consent, basically, right? I get consent to touch women in places. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. But what he was saying implied consent. This, you see, it's an allegation.
Look, man.
It seems to be more credible than Blasey Ford, and they're like, yeah, we think he did it. We're just still going to vote for him anyway.
Look, man. I watched, you know, Joe does his little thing. Nancy Pelosi on The View. Nancy Pelosi wants you to issue an apology for. Okay, so I'm sorry I was in their space. I get that Joe's touchy-feely. We all know Joe's touchy-feely. He's on video. He's doing pictures and all this stuff. I'm trying to think of the best way I can say this.
So that we don't get in trouble with edit.
No, I'm not going to be. I just want to say, now Joe says he doesn't remember her. He doesn't remember any episode with her. I'm a guy. I've lived a lot of life, 47 years. I want to say that if I get to a point where I say to you, I don't remember such and such, it's because I've done it so many times. There's a good chance I don't remember that one particular one. Now, I'm not making an accusation there, but that's just how the human psyche tends to work.
Or Joe Biden is suffering from some sort of, you know, loss of mental faculties, and he doesn't remember very much of anything.
We wouldn't want to say that, though.
Let me tell you something. If I get like that, that's going to be the last thing I forget. You know what I'm talking about, Sarah? You know what I'm talking about? Come here, wait. Okay, bye. Yeah, wait, don't worry about it.
I think it's a really great time for a break. We'll be back.
Hard out.
All right, Friday's poll, which adjective, speaking of Joe Biden, most correctly describes good old creepy Joe? Most of you said senile. 39% of you said senile, followed closely by 33% who said corrupt. Creepy came in at 21.3, and racist came in at 6.2. I mean, I think it's really sad that there was all three of those were so close together. I think it shows how hard it is to choose. If you only have to choose one adjective to describe Joe Biden, and your options are senile, corrupt, and creepy, that's not a position I would want to be in if I were Joe Biden. All right, what's today's poll? I don't have.
Look, man,
I have it on here.
I want to like the guy. But no.
Do Trump's tweets help or hurt his chances at getting reelected? Do Trump's tweets help or hurt his chances at getting reelected, or does anything matter at all? Does anything President Trump does it even matter?
Yes, it matters.
At freaking all.
Yes, it matters. Listen, I was down there with Colonel Allen West. We were on the state capitol in Austin, Texas over the weekend. We gave our speeches, and there were a lot of people at that rally who came up and said, Trump better go back and get that base. And I promise you, one of the ways he's going to do it is by the tweets. Yeah. I don't care how annoying you find him. Trump has got to come out, and he's got to do what he did in 2016 if he's going to win 2020. Because believe it or not, y'all think this is a shoe-in deal. It's not. Joe Biden is for real. In terms of if you even get close to believing the polls, we're in danger.
Yeah. Josh, real quick, what do you think?
Yeah, I have no reason to think that Trump's Twitter hurts him as much as a lot of the never Trumpers think it hurts him. I mean, he needs his base.
Right.
And, that is Trump's way of communicating directly to his base with no media filter. I mean, can he tone it down a little on the margin? I mean, probably.
Probably. You and I could. We hope.
His base is going to vote for him regardless. By the way, our thoughts and prayers to Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, who is healing at home. We're praying for you, buddy, and full recovery on the way. We know it.